Sister's vicious lie ruins my engagement and turns my family against me. A night out costed me my life, my family, and everything I had. Now I am heartbroken and homeless. I was 21 when my fiancé asked me to marry him. He was the absolute light of my life. We had known each other since preschool. Our families were very close. He would come and have dinner with us on a daily basis, and vice versa. He doesn't have any siblings, but I have 2 older sisters, which is very important, as he was also very close with them. We grew up together. When we started dating, I don't think our parents stopped celebrating for weeks. He helped me deal with a lot of my anxiety, and even when I gained a little weight and my mother berated me saying he was going to leave me, he told her off and said he loved me for who I was, not for what I looked like, even though he claimed I was the most beautiful girl in the world to him. We were only engaged for 6 months before the incident. My middle oldest sister, let's call her Nikki, was a very cold person. She never showed any affection. She only ever opened up to my fiancé, as she saw him as a brother, and he also helped her through a lot of her dark times, such as battling drug addictions and breaking the law. She and I never saw eye to eye. I loved her dearly, because she was my sister, but didn't like her as a person. Out of the blue, she told me she wanted to take me clubbing, as we had never been together before, and she felt bad that she was so distant to me. I agreed, and that night, we went out. Clubbing wasn't really my style, but once I had a few drinks, I loosened up a little and began having fun. The night was going smoothly until Nikki spotted a guy across the room whom she claimed she wanted to climb like a tree. She walked over to him, and within a few minutes, she was back with a sour expression on her face. I asked her what was up, but she never said anything. I kept pressing because I didn't want our night to be ruined. She then told me the guy didn't want her number, but he wanted mine instead. I told her he was a loser, and there were plenty of guys around who would kill to be with a girl like her. She didn't budge, though. She told me she needed to use the restroom, and then we would leave. I waited for another hour. During this time, I was sipping on a lot of different cocktails. I then started feeling really dizzy and lightheaded. I figured I'd just cab it home, as I was certain Nikki had left. On the way out, though, I bumped into a friend of Nikki whom she had briefly dated. He asked me if I needed a hand to my car, and I explained I was getting a cab. He said he was getting ready to leave and we could share one. I told him okay. We walked out of the club together and got into the first cab we saw. I tried to find my phone in my purse, but I felt myself getting dizzier and dizzier. I don't remember what happened next, as I blacked out, and the next morning I woke up on a hard sofa, my head pounding. When I came to, I realized I was in Nikki's friend's house, and my phone was sitting on the glass table in front of me, but it was flat. When he noticed I was awake, he offered some tablets and water and explained that I had passed out in the cab. He didn't remember my parents' address, so he just picked me up and took me back here, where he laid me on the sofa. I told him I needed to go home, as my fiancé would be worried. He called a cab, and I left. When I arrived at my parents' house, my mother, father, Nikki, my fiancé, and his parents were all standing in the living room. I thought they were worried about me, but the instant I opened my mouth, my fiancé asked, how could I do this to him? I tried to explain that my phone went flat, but he then went on screaming about how I could cheat on him. I was baffled. Why would he think that? I tried to explain the night's events, but I kept getting cut off. Nikki then chimed in and said I was a liar, and how could I be so heartless to a man who has been there for me through thick and thin? She went on to say I kept flirting with random guys all night, and then when she went to the bathroom, she saw me leave with her friend. I told her what had happened, and she showed me photos on her phone of us leaving. His hand was on my back, ushering me outside. Yes, the photo did look horrible, and I was so drunk that I didn't even realize his hand was on my back at all. My fiancé was so angry, he kept shouting. His mom and mine were both crying. I then asked Nikki to call her friend, and he would confirm that nothing happened. But when she called him, he told a completely different story. He said I begged him to take me back to his place, and when he did, we slept together multiple times. I saw red and started crying and yelling at Nikki because I knew she had organized this whole thing to make me look bad. I begged my fiancé to believe me, but he just shook his head and left. When everyone had cleared out, my mother slapped me across the face and told me to get out. I left and went to a friend's house where I stayed for a few nights. During those nights, I called my fiancé, crying and pleading with him to believe me that nothing happened, but it all fell on deaf ears, as he never returned any of my calls or texts. My mum texted me and told me she was kicking me out, that she couldn't believe I would do such a thing, and a lot of hurtful other slurs I don't think I could repeat here. She didn't even give me time to get my things, as she threw everything out. I was now homeless. None of my family would take me in, as they chose the side of my fiancé and my mother. I was homeless and single in less than a day and a half. My entire world had been taken away because of Nikki's lies. Now for weeks, I tried everything to get my fiancé and my family back. The limit for me, though, was when Christmas time had come, and I went over to my mother's house to try and reconcile. I was sleeping from couch to couch during this time. When I got to my parents' house, I knocked on the door, but no one answered. My friend then called me and told me she just saw on Facebook that my family were in another state celebrating Christmas, and they had posted pictures online. Everyone was there: my sisters, parents, grandparents, and even my fiancé and his family. When I myself saw the photos, I couldn't stop crying, as they all looked so happy. I cried for days and days before deciding to block them all. I even returned my engagement ring. My friend knew someone a couple hours away who was looking for some help in his restaurant. He even had living arrangements above where he worked, so I could get rent at a cheap price and work at the same time. I wanted to start over with my life, as it hurt me that no one took my side and they all left me to fend for myself. I was able to move pretty quickly and was doing well. The apartment was tiny and I had to work more than 10 hours almost every day, but I was able to save a lot of money. I'm not living in the apartment anymore. I was able to rent a much nicer condo, but I am still working at the restaurant as an assistant manager. Now it has been roughly 2 years since I left, and have not spoken to any of my family. I had no idea what was going with them until I got a knock on my door. It was my ex-fiancé. I was shocked to say the least. All these feelings came rushing back, and all I wanted to do was jump into his arms. But then I remembered the pain I had felt and tried to slam the door in his face. But he stopped it and asked me to let him explain. He said that Nikki had gotten married. She had confessed that she lied about the situation because she had found someone she loved so much and realized what a horrible thing she had done. I asked him how he found me, and he said my friend told him. My entire family had been trying to get in touch with me and wanted to see me. I told him I needed time to see if I even wanted to have them in my life. He left, and I have been a mess since. I don't know what to do. I know I will never ever forgive Nikki. She could rot for all I cared, but it's hard because my other family and fiancé didn't know she was lying. But I also felt like they abandoned me too quickly without letting me explain my side. I don't know if I should forgive them. Update. So, I never got back to my ex. I didn't know what to do, but eventually, he must have given my phone number to my parents, as they texted asking to meet up. I never replied and was planning on organizing a Zoom meeting, but didn't need to, as they also showed up at my door. Well, my father did. When I opened the door and saw him standing there, I ended up throwing up, which he insisted on cleaning. When he was done, we sat down, and I just bursted in tears. My emotions were all over the place. My father has worn the same cologne for a really long time, so when I smelt it, it just brought back all these memories. He tried to hug me, but I pushed him away and asked what he was doing here. He went on to explain that he and my mother are getting a divorce. He said he begged my mother to get in touch with me the minute I left, but she refused and said I was acting like a baby, and if I wanted to leave them after doing something so horrible, then I could do things on my own from then on. I asked him how long it took them to notice I was gone. He said they arrived back home after New Year's Eve and were planning on inviting me over so we could talk. That's when they got in touch with my friend, and she told them I left, and she didn't know where I was. I asked him why he didn't listen to my side of the story and why they threw me away so easily. He just started crying. He said he never meant for things to get so out of hand. He wishes more than anything he could take it all back. I said when they found out Nikki was taking drugs and had dropped out of high school, they didn't throw her away. Instead, we all went on a holiday, so she could focus on things besides drugs. And during that trip, she got hooked on alcohol, but each time they defended her over and over. He said he had no idea. My mother was going to kick me out. He thought it was going to be for a few days, but then they decided at the last minute to spend Christmas out of state. My mother apparently promised him I would be allowed back home after they got back. I said she threw away all my stuff, but he said everything was still there and she lied about that. I asked him what has happened to Nikki, and he said she is dead to him. He wants nothing to do with her, but my mother has been crying to him, asking to forgive Nikki, as she is not well, and they had already lost one daughter. They can't lose two. He blocked my mother and Nikki, and has been on my ex's case about finding me. My ex caved in when my dad said he blocked my mother and Nikki, and told him where I lived. I asked that he never show up again, unless I give him permission, and he agreed. He asked what would happen now, and I said, I really don't know, and that he hurt me really bad. I then just went into detail about how much he hurt me, and what it felt like seeing them so happy without me, and how hard it has been. We were both crying by the end of it, but I was really glad I got it all out. It felt like a huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders. My dad then said he knew a few places around the area and would help get me a better apartment and a better job, but I told him I wouldn't be leaving this job, as my boss helped me out so much, and I wanted to repay him at all costs. I said I didn't want him to do anything for me, but I said I do want to reconcile, but it has to be on my own terms, and it is going to take a very, very long time to trust him again. He said he would do anything to make up for what he did. I asked him why Nikki did this, and if she said anything about it. Well, she said she thought my ex deserved better than me and wanted to see him happy because he was making too many sacrifices in the relationship. She loved him like a brother and wanted to break the engagement off. So that night she asked her friend to come and escort me out of the club so she could get photos and to take me home so her plan could work. She said nothing sexual happened. I went to sleep on the sofa, and that was it. He was up playing video games all night until I woke up, which he has proof of apparently. My dad was planning on getting my stuff from my mother's house and bringing it to me, but I told him I didn't want those things anymore. I then went to ask about Nikki's husband, and he said my mother has been hush-hush with the entire situation, but he had his number and wrote it down for me. After my dad left, I decided to call Nikki's husband. I was sweating the entire time and felt so sick. What if I could hear her in the background? Well, anyhow, when he picked up, I just spit everything out, which I deeply regret because I should have eased into it for him. He sounded really confused, and I explained the entire situation again. I even went into detail about her drug and alcohol problems. I was honestly expecting him to curse me out and defend Nikki, but instead, he let out a long sigh. It turned out that he had a feeling she wasn't exactly innocent. It turned out that Nikki and his sister had been having problems, and she had been spouting non-stop lies about his sister and had caused a huge rift between them. His sister didn't even attend their wedding. I told him I was sorry, but he should make things right with his sister because Nikki was the problem, not her. We spoke a little more, and he hung up. I'm not entirely sure what he is going to do with that information. I hope he cuts his loses and leaves her, because he sounded like a really nice person. But even he has lost his own sister because of Nikki. So I have decided to reconcile with my dad. My mother has always run the show their entire marriage, so the fact he is putting his foot down and divorcing her and going no contact with Nikki shows that he is serious about wanting to make amends. I don't think I will ever reconcile with my mother, as she thinks Nikki is also a victim in all this, and at this point, I don't care to listen to her excuses. For my ex, I haven't had the time to meet with him and talk, though my dad mentioned he wanted to come with my dad, but he told him I would be too overwhelmed if both were there. Seeing them separated will help make clear decisions. He also mentioned my ex was arrested for assaulting Nikki's friend who lied about the entire situation. He was being charged, but the charges were dropped a few days later. Thank you guys for being so patient and so caring and just amazing. Story 2. I expose Dad's double life, and he's cheating with a coworker half his age. Today, I experienced the definition of fuck around and find out. Some backstory. Almost a year ago, my family experienced the loss of my grandpa, my dad's father. It was sudden, and it struck my father really hard. He started having more emotional outbursts, being more reclusive, etc. We tried our best to be understanding and help him in any way he needed. He found himself a therapist and seemed to be working through a lot of his feelings and thoughts. He still wasn't acting entirely like the him we once knew, but death affects everyone differently, and this made his behavior easy to excuse. My dad and I don't live in the same city, so we often meet up at halfway points for lunch. We have always been close, so it's commonplace for us to talk about our feelings, emotions, and recent life events with each other. Now the story. During our first lunch since my grandpa's passing, I noticed that my dad was talking a lot about this new girl at his work. We will call her Stacy. He said that Stacy was helping him a lot of his trauma and being there for him. Stacy's husband had been through some similar traumas that my dad had experienced, and that was being brought up in therapy, so he said she offered him support. He really felt he could be himself around her. He made it abundantly clear that he did not feel he could be himself around his wife of 20 years, my mom, but that he could be with Stacy. I thought this was an odd comment to make, and I think this is where my suspicions of their real intentions began, but I knew he was struggling. It made me feel relieved that he had someone he trusted. It struck me a little weird that she was 29, but again, sometimes workplaces can create weird and unexpected friendships, and with me being 26, I wondered if maybe he saw her as another daughter, since I wasn't able to be around much due to distance. He assured me that Stacy was married to a man named Andrew. They were strictly friends, but in his own words, people from his work had started to think something was going on between them, so they had stopped talking at work and had moved to texting. He even went so far as to say later in the conversation that he thinks a strong marriage should be able to survive someone cheating. I assured him that that wasn't healthy and that I'm not sure what kind of relationship he wanted with his wife, but I did not want a relationship founded on infidelity. Obviously, my alarm bells were going off. With what little information I had on Stacy, I went and found her online. I stalked her, And, just like my dad said, she was seemingly in a young, happy marriage with Andrew. She kept her social media pretty private, but from what I could see, she looked like an average 29-year-old woman. I couldn't possibly imagine what she would want with my dad, and if anything, I thought maybe my dad had a work crush that he was reading too much into. No one wants to think that their dad could be capable of a full-blown affair. Over the next few visits with my dad, I would hear him continually talk about Stacy when telling stories about work or talking about his friends. She always seemed to come up. I couldn't help but notice that he would avoid calling her by name. She would just be she or her or girl from work. It's as if he completely forgot the things he had told me about her, or as if he was afraid to say her name around me. Infidelity is never mentioned again, but he is always talking about how he's fighting with my mom, Lily. How as he goes through therapy, she might not like the man he's becoming. He tells me how he's standing his ground and getting into verbal arguments with her. I imagine this is self-sabotage due to his guilt because of the cheating. Fast forward to today, about a year since I first heard about Stacy. I went on my laptop, which I do not use often. I opened Instagram, and I realized I still had my dad's login credentials saved on my computer from a one-off back in 2016. My dad is and always has been sketchy with his passwords, so I assumed that likely it wouldn't work, but I tried the login anyways. To my surprise, I was in. I won't even pretend like I didn't know exactly what I was looking for, or like I'm above looking through his DMs. This is also where I fucked around and found out. I opened their DMs, which were pretty bleak at first. I thought that I could rest my suspicions, more like hoped, until I couldn't. It started out with sending corny photos to each other. Things about, you can kiss me whenever you want, I'm yours, and your arms feel like home and I'm homesick. Really juvenile weird shit. Things I wouldn't send to a coworker if you paid me. Still in denial, I kept scrolling when I saw it. Nudes, from her only, thanks God. Full-blown sexting conversations. Conversations about their existing partners and the potential of leaving them for each other. I love yous. Conversations with their plans to sleep together for the first time, etc. You get the picture. All of my suspicions laid out in front of me. He was willing to risk it all for a married woman 3 years older than his daughter. He was willing to hurt the woman he had supposedly loved for 20 years, destroy his family, destroy Stacy's family for what? Absolute fucking selfishness. The worst part for me was that they actively talk about their existing partners in this chat. Stacy is always making fun of my mom. Does Lily wear lacy bras for you? Does Lily let you go down on her with her bush, lol? As if Stacy couldn't become more of a disgusting human, as if she's not already sleeping with a married 53-year-old father of 2, she has to degrade his wife, an innocent victim in this situation. They assure each other that they love their current partners so much that it hurts, and they don't understand how they can have the capacity to love 2 people at the same time. Is disgusting and childish. I don't know how this ends. They still work closely together. I cannot bring myself to tell my mom. I don't want my dad to know that I know. I don't want him to feel backed into a corner like he has to tell my mom. I want him to tell my mom because he knows it's the right thing to do. I have looked up to my dad my whole life, and I feel like the whole view I have had of him as this selfless, loving, caring family man has been shattered. I'm so disappointed in his actions, and I don't know what to do. It's eating away at me. Edit. I was told it would be beneficial to add that my parents do have a kid who is a minor who lives with them. I have not known about this affair the entire time. I found out about it on Thursday, so please stop saying that I'm intentionally holding this secret for my father. My parents share an email account, and I will not see my mom in person until probably Christmas. Update. So, I finally called my mom. Her and my dad had spent the day together at their cottage, so I waited until they were home and then asked if she could go somewhere alone so we could talk on the phone. Her reaction was nothing like I imagined. She sounded like she already knew. Her reaction also made me feel like this wasn't the first time this has happened. She laughed and asked me what I thought I saw. She blamed herself and said that she doesn't meet my dad's needs. I explained to her that that's not fair and that she doesn't deserve to be lied to and cheated on and put at risk for sexually transmitted diseases. I said the way they spoke about my mom in the chat was disgusting and that this was wrong. She asked to see the screenshot, so I sent them to her. She kept reassuring me that her and my dad were in it for the long haul and wouldn't divorce. I told her I didn't care about that. I said no matter her decision, I supported her either way. Even though it wasn't what I was anticipating, I felt relieved. I felt like a weight had been lifted. She thanked me for telling her and said that I would always be her sweet girl. Everything seemed to be going well until she confronted my dad and called me back. I don't know what happened with the conversation between her and my dad, but it's clear that he is a master manipulator and not at all the person I thought he was prior to all this. My mom's tone had completely shifted on the phone. She was scolding me. He confirmed the affair. He confirmed everything I had said and brought forward to her. Somehow, they're blaming me. They're telling me I'm wrong. My mom told me that she's read all the screenshots I sent but had nothing to say about them. They're staying together, and in her words, this is just a bump in the road. They've had highs and lows, and they'll have lows again. I said I would support her either way, so I can't be mad, but I can't help but be sad at how low she thinks of herself to accept this behavior. I love your dad, and he loves me. What a horrible message to send to your child. She told me that guilt does bad things to people, and that she thinks I got myself worked up over nothing. She told me it was wrong of me to look at his Instagram messages, and that it was a breach of trust. Ironic, considering my dad committed the biggest breach of trust there is in a marriage. I also never would have looked at his messages had he not planted this seed of infidelity in my brain. She explained, my dad is very angry with me, and she doesn't know if our relationship is repairable. I assumed my dad would be mad at me, of course, but for my mom to seemingly side with him and turn her back on me too is almost too much to take. I know she's being manipulated, but this is where it ends, I guess. I can't stand to look at either of them. I feel like I was just orphaned. I can't fight a fight someone doesn't want me to on their behalf. Deep down, I know I'm not to blame for this, don't get me wrong, but it's really hard to not feel awful when your parents, whom you've trusted, turn their back on you. I do feel like I did right by myself in telling my mom the truth, but I can't help but think that everything would have been easier if I never said anything. My dad still follows Stacy. He has blocked me and my fiancé on all social media platforms. He's quite literally showing that he chooses his affair partner over his daughter. I know he's reacting out of embarrassment and anger, but I've blocked him in return. He doesn't get to choose when he comes back into my life. All of this hurts a lot. Update. I've been working with a therapist to figure out what I really want to come out of all this and how I can proceed with or without my family. I initially settled on no contact with my dad and limited contact with my mom. After some thinking, I decided that I wanted to have my dad in my life and rebuild at least an amicable relationship with him. I understand that that may not be what everyone would choose, but I really couldn't imagine my big life events and my future without my dad. I reached out to my mom via text and asked her if she believed my dad was still too angry with me to talk. She urged me to not reach out and asked me to continue leaving the door open and told me that she was encouraging my dad to do the same for me. At that point, I decided that if he had to be encouraged to leave the door open for his only daughter, then maybe it actually wasn't worth reaching out to him. He ended up texting me the next day that he unblocked my number, but he wasn't ready to talk. I waited 3 weeks for him to text me, but received nothing more. I reached out just asking for a timeline on when I can expect that he will be ready to talk, and he replied saying he has been waiting for me to contact him. Well, the conversation started fine. He said he loved me and he missed me. He said that we were just going to have to agree to disagree on the whole situation. I explained that wouldn't be happening and that I didn't care about the cheating. That's not my problem. My problem is how he has hurt me and how his silent treatment affected me. This is obviously not what he wanted to hear. I'll save ye all the nitty-gritty. The conversation ended with him saying he was mad at me because I didn't come to him first and give him a chance to come clean. But in the same message said that if I had kept my nose out of his business, he would have taken this secret to the grave, and that it was me who hurt my mom, because I told her. He repeatedly demanded that I apologize to my mom for hurting her, and apologize to him for betraying his trust. There was a lot more to the conversation, of course, but to wrap this all up, I double down that I did nothing wrong. He is the one who betrayed his wife, and if my mom would like an apology, she is more than welcome to reach out to me directly. Other than that, we're done here. His number is blocked. I don't plan on unblocking him. I feel confident in my decision this time. I don't feel like him, and I are existing in the same reality. I don't feel like he's the dad I once knew. Sorry, this is so long, and not a happy ending at all, but it does feel nice to get this all out here. Thanks for following along with my story, and I'll do my best to share here if there's any more major updates. But I truthfully feel like this might be the end of it all. God, please, let it be the end.